Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, I'm sorry. Welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is Operating a Safe, Healthy, and Successful Farm Stand. And this webinar is part of our webinar series called Agritourism and Direct Sales, Best Practices in Times of COVID and Beyond. The webinar series is organized by the UC Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program, UC SAREP, and our wonderful partners who are working with us. Our partners are Community Alliance with Family Farmers, Sonoma County Farm Trails, who actually organized most of today's webinar, Sierra Oro Farm Trail, Pleasants Valley Agriculture Association, and Modoc Harvest. So that's the team. And for today's webinar, let's see, I will be sharing the link for today's webinar in the chat in just a minute, as soon as we get going. Today's speakers are, me, I'm hosting from UC SAREP, and co-hosting with me is Laura Crothers, also from UC SAREP. Hi, Laura, thank you. And Laura will be managing the chat and the questions and answers. So if you have any questions about the series or the webinar, use the chat to talk to Laura. You can also introduce yourself in the chat. I would encourage you all to introduce yourselves in the chat. And then we'll use the question and answer, the Q&A function, to ask questions of the speakers. And put your questions for any of the speakers in the Q&A, and we'll answer them as we can. We're gonna have all the presentations and then have questions and answers at the end after all the speakers. Today's speakers are Ellen Cavalli from Sonoma County Farm Trails, Emmett Hopkins from Foggy River Farm, and Rayna Yagi from Bounty Farm, Petaluma Bounty. And we're going to start with a brief overview of farm stand regulations. So before I get to that, I'm just going to share with you all these links in the chat. So give me just a sec here to get all of these into the chat. All right, and now I'm going to give you a very brief overview of the regulations and rules for running farm stands. So here we go.
Penny, could you try pasting those links in the chat again? I don't think they went out to all of the participants.
I put them to all panelists and attendees, but I will do it again. Oh, I didn't send it. Sorry. Okay, there they are. All right, so. Sorry for the dead air, folks. Here's our brief overview of rules and regulations for farm stands. So farm stands are a really good way for farmers to start selling directly to the public. It's relatively simple and not too many rules and regulations. Farm stands are allowed in most counties by right in agricultural zoning. And in general, if you're only selling your own produce, whole produce, not cut up, no sampling, you generally don't need any permits from environmental health, and you generally don't need any permits from your county planning department. If you're in ag zoning and selling just your own produce, you can't be inside a building. There might be some limits on the size of your farm stand. There might be some rules about your signage. There might be some rules about, about your driveways or your access roads and parking. So you might want to check with your local planning department about any of those rules, but it's relatively easy if you're just selling your own produce. All of these slides will be shared and they'll be on our website. You won't need to scribble, so we'll be sharing with them on our website. If you can also at your farm stand generally sell a little bit of extra things beyond your own produce. And in most cases, you can do this without a permit, but it can only be 10% of your floor area, not exceeding 50 square feet of your farm stand area. And everything you sell like this, without a permit or on your allowed by right farm stand, needs to be shelf stable. And shelf stable means it doesn't need to be kept hot or cold. It can be stored at room temperature and is usually packaged products. And these could come from your cottage food operation or somebody else's cottage food operation, or other products that are shelf stable, non-potentially hazardous, prepared at a licensed food facility. And again, this can only be shelf-stable products, and you can only do it at a limited amount of your farm stand. And you might need a permit from your county planning department. You might need to check with them. Now, when you get into selling things beyond your own produce and perhaps your own shell eggs and a few non-potentially hazardous extra things. I mean, you can sell t-shirts, you can sell a few things like that in your 50 square feet. But once you get into trying to sample things or sell other farmers' produce or sell anything else like meat, dairy, alcohol, you really need to talk to your environmental health department. And you need to talk to your county planning department or your city planning department, because there are much stricter regulations when you get beyond selling your own whole produce. Now, during COVID times, there's a whole nother set of rules that you want to keep track of. What you're seeing here is a poster that was created by UC Cooperative Extension, Fresno County. And this poster you can download along with the signs that you're going to see on the next slide. And this poster is something for your employees at your farm stand to put in the back of your farm stand and to keep track of. The basic rules during COVID are: don't work at the farm stand if you've got COVID-19 or if you've been in contact with somebody with COVID-19. Wash your hands and or use hand sanitizer frequently. At the cash box, be sure and use hand sanitizer after each transaction with a customer, and sanitize your hands between customers. Limit the number of customers in line if you can. Keep your customers 6 feet apart, require 6 feet distancing. Draw those lines on the ground, or is a good idea for people to know where to stand. Clean and disinfect all your surfaces frequently. The new one is that you do need to provide a hand washing and or a hand sanitizer station at your farm stand. During COVID, you might want to pre-package produce before sale so your customers avoid handling. And you also will want to not let your customers touch anything. Only staff should be touching the produce. No other customers should be touching the produce. And make sure that you are following CDC guidelines and state and local guidelines for everybody wearing masks. You'll probably want to ask people to wear masks at this point. Other things you want to think about is having a way for people who are at high risk to shop without being in contact with other people, maybe curbside pickup, pre-order, or special hours for people at high risk. You'll want to communicate with your customers. This is pretty important. Make sure your customers know what you're doing to keep them safe. And you can tell them on your social media. You can tell them with signs like this. This is one of the signs that's available for download from UC Cooperative Extension, Fresno County. They made various signs for farm stands to be able to use. And you'll probably want to think about pre-registration or scheduling picking times. And we're going to hear a whole lot more about this and how it really works from our farmers who are going to talk with you next. And I'll tell you more about the rest of the webinar series at the end. So now I would like to introduce Ellen from Sonoma County Farm Trails. Ellen, you're on, and you're in charge of introducing the other speakers.
All right, great. Well, that was a really wonderful introduction. Thank you so much, Penny, for sharing all that information. So I'm the project manager at Sonoma County Farm Trails, and we are the original farm trails. We were created in 1973 by forward-thinking farmers and agritourism pioneers to facilitate economically critical direct sales by producing and marketing a map of our local farm stands. So many of you who are familiar with farm trails, you always think of us as those cool maps over these 47 years. Since then, our mission has been to connect the public to Sonoma County farmers, ranchers, producers, and purveyors to ensure the economic viability of local agriculture and to instill an appreciation of ag as a vital part of our community. So that's really crucial. There's two prongs to it, right? So we essentially have two branches. One is promoting and driving business to our members, and we have various ways of doing that, from our website, which is farmtrails.org, to events, special marketing campaigns, social media, newsletters, and the like, as well as educating the public about the importance of supporting local food systems. And we do that through these sorts of projects and a really broad range of partners throughout Sonoma County. And really our mission essentially is to help keep farms forever in Sonoma County. But of course we can't do that alone. And our farmers that we really fortunate to introduce you all to have really been making incredible strides in keeping farms forever. And our membership is diverse. We have multiple types of models of farm stands among our membership. Some will be really large. They'll be open year round. They will be selling their own farm grown produce, their eggs, meat, flowers, plant starts, pantry items, and selling other producers' products such as cheese or meat. Some others will be smaller, and they'll be dedicated solely to their own farm produced products, produce, grains on the honor system. And then others will be smaller and seasonal, and their own farm products, maybe open by appointment or one day a week. And the thing to know about that is the choice is really dependent on your staffing, your production plan, your offering, your goals. And as I could assure you, everybody has had to learn as they go along. They've had to evolve. And especially this past year, have had to pivot. So today we get to hear from two great farmers, and the first one will be Emmett Hopkins of Foggy River, and he's really notable for relaunching their family farm during the pandemic. And so he came up, and he and his family came up with really creative ways for diversifying their options and making it a safe place. So I will hand it off to Emmett.
All right, great. Thank you, Ellen, and thank you for the invitation, and hello to everyone out there. I'm going to try to share my screen now. So just give me a moment and I'll get my presentation up here. Okay, so I'm going to cover some of the things that we did during the pandemic with the farm stand as well as other aspects of the farm. I'll start off by giving just a real quick overview of our farm for context, and then move into our experience with the farm stand before the pandemic, and then our experience during the pandemic, and some takeaways. So our farm, we have pretty much, if you reached into the grab bag of marketing outlets for a small family farm growing produce, we've probably tried pretty much all of those in one form or another. We've done a lot of farmers market sales. We've done wholesale to restaurants, grocery stores, distributors. We've done CSA, U-Pick, you name it, pretty much. And a variety of crops as well, sort of the whole grab bag, from grains and dry beans to fruits and vegetables, eggs, breeding dairy goats, and turkeys for Thanksgiving. So we're going to focus today on kind of the farm stand element. When we started doing our CSA, we started really with a more traditional boxed CSA model where we would box up all of our produce for our members, load it up in the truck and take it out to drop off sites in the towns around our farm. We quickly found that we were hearing feedback from some of our members that a lot of the same people who joined our CSA are the same people who like to shop at the farmers market, and we would hear from them, well, gosh, I love being part of the CSA, but I have so much produce now, I don't go to the farmers market and I really miss it. And so they would stop their CSA membership for that reason. So we decided we would try something a little different and invite people onto the farm and basically try to replicate that experience that people were getting at the farmers market for them when they would come to our farm stand to pick up their CSA share. And so we did this for 10 plus years. We had a full farm stand set up. Our members could still opt to have a box delivered to town if they wanted to, but most of our members and families chose to come out to the farm because they love the experience. And so we would also accept drop-in customers. So we did some sales to the general public, but it was primarily CSA sales. So a couple things that we found beneficial about doing this sort of hybrid model between a farm stand and a CSA. One was just the improved CSA member experience. People had a great time, and a community built up through that process. People love to be able to pick their own, bunch of carrots or their own head of cabbage and feel like they've got some choice rather than having it all boxed up for them. We also found we had increased sales because CSA members could add something on. They could say, I need an extra bunch of carrots today. I want to add 2 pounds of dry beans, etc. And also from drop-in customers who would just pull in off the street and wander down to the stand. And then I also mentioned just community building. People were bumping into their friends and joining up with their kids. Kids would be playing, people would bring a picnic, doing U-Pick, the whole 9 yards. So I would highly recommend that if you have either a farm stand and you don't have a CSA, you consider introducing a CSA, or if you have a CSA program and it's possible to add the farm stand element, I would highly encourage people to do that. And one other little tidbit about that is that we had a U-Pick garden right next to our farm stand. And again, I'd highly recommend for people to consider having a U-Pick element to a farm stand. It gives customers a fun experience that they're going to go and tell their friends about. They're going to go and post on social media, and they're going to want to come back and do more. And then it also just really reduces your workload a little bit. A few less cherry tomatoes and green beans to harvest at the end of the day. So that's a little bit about how we were operating. And we sort of put the CSA and this whole farm stand into hibernation a couple years ago, partly due to having young kids and just wanting to take a little break from the grueling small farm life. But when COVID hit, basically a year ago, and I found myself not working my other off-farm job and wanting something to do with the kids, and finding there was a huge demand for local produce and plants and gardening. So we thought this is an opportunity to do something. So to start with, we grew plants. As a lot of you who were growing last spring probably remember, and even this spring, there's such a huge demand for seed from gardeners all around the country that our seed companies are just having so much trouble keeping up. I had trouble buying pumpkin seed just in December already for this coming growing season because of the demand from gardeners. So we thought we'd try to take advantage of that gardeners were having trouble finding seeds and plants locally. And so we grew some plants, and we decided we would donate, for every plant we sold, we would donate one to families who couldn't afford them through some local nonprofits. And at the end of the process, we ended up donating thousands of plants, which was really gratifying. So we did an online ordering system. People were ordering exactly what they wanted ahead of time and paying ahead of time. And it was, pretty small scale. We were just setting things out. There's my assistant there. And people would come at their designated time and pick up their plants. So that was stage one. I mentioned that we were doing online ordering, and this was through Square. We had started using Square for farmers market as well as CSA membership sales some years ago. And so we were able to pretty easily introduce an online store to help people order ahead of time. So then we moved from plant sales to produce sales, also with the reserve ahead of time and pick up at your scheduled time, kind of like the farm stand, but without the crowd and without all the produce being laid out in front of you. So kind of not like the farm stand too. But the next step was to plant a whole bunch of pumpkins. And we decided we were going to do a pumpkin patch combined with a farm stand, an autumn farm stand where we would sell autumn produce, winter squash, dry beans, popcorn, and that kind of thing, right alongside of the busy road that our farm is on. And so I'm going to walk through just some of the basic considerations that we had when setting up the farm stand. I will mention things about the pumpkin patch as well, even though that's not our focus, but I'll be focusing on the farm stand aspect. So let's see. One aspect of the farm stand and pumpkin patches that we were highly encouraging customers to prepay and sign up for a time slot online. We were not requiring it, but we were highly encouraging it through all of our marketing. We were also entirely outdoors, as opposed to previously we had some covered barn space, but we did this entirely outdoors. And we had these identical produce stands, 3 identical displays that were spaced over 6 feet apart each. And behind the photograph here, that what you don't see is there's another display with some of the other products that I mentioned under a shade canopy. We used a lot of visual aids such as pumpkins spaced out 10 feet apart and other plentiful signage to just help families maintain the appropriate spacing. Here's an example of a sign. As people were walking in, you'll see a pumpkin right behind there with a facial covering there, just to remind people we had those scattered around as well. And then again, more signage reminding people to wait until the appropriate time to enter the check-in area. We also organized things in a one-way flow so that there wasn't a lot of crossing of paths. So here's an example of signage to help people with that one-way flow, which in this case was for the pumpkin patch, but it also applies to the farm stand, or could very easily apply to a farm stand. We had numbered aisles that people would walk, a family would get a number, and then they had their free exploration time in their number during their time slot to help space, and then they would flow around to the road on the other side and back to the checkout and farm stand. Let's see, plenty of sort of staging in the check-in, checkout area was important, as well as plenty of shade. So you can see here we had, I think, 6 6-foot tables set up for our check-in area, just to give those of us back behind there plenty of space to not feel like anyone was crowded, and also shade coverage for shade or other weather, so that customers could get under there and still not feel like we're all crowded up against each other. We had, of course, we're wiping down surfaces such as these cart handles after every use with alcohol spray and wipes. So we had an area for the clean ones and an area for the used ones near the checkout. These are my other trusty helpers. And of course, plenty of gloves, hand sanitizer, wipes in the appropriate areas such as check-in, check-out, like Penny mentioned earlier. So now I'm going to just move into kind of some of the lessons and things that we're going to take with us once we're not in the COVID world anymore, which we all hope is soon. But there are things that we found that we did during this time that would be beneficial to continue doing, as opposed to seeing them as total hardships. One is just that scheduling customers ahead of time can have benefits, even if you are a farm stand. Schedule ahead of time, provide people with the opportunity to pre-purchase if that's possible. So that's going to be, I think, my next bullet, online ordering. So for scheduling, one thing in particular was very helpful, which is it helps with staffing. It allows you to space customers out through the day, through the pre-scheduling, so that you don't have as much of a rush. Of course, you're still going to have drop-in customers, but it can help with spacing. And it also gives you a sense of how many people to expect during the day. You're not going to see everyone sign up ahead of time, of course, but the number of signups that you do see is going to give you an indication, a clue as to how much traffic you're going to get on a given day. And then as far as the online ordering, of course, there's less hassle of dealing with cash and cards on site and less touch points. You're also committing customers to coming. They've already put some money down, and so they have an incentive to show up at your farm stand. And usually they are going to buy something beyond what they've already paid for. And we found this to be the case very often, because people, when they get there, you tell them, oh, you've bought this much, or maybe you didn't specify the items you want, maybe you just have a credit, but and then people feel like they haven't spent anything yet, so they add on, another $20, $30, $40, even though they've already paid that much. And it also gives an action item to focus your marketing around, which is easy for people to do right now from their home. They can click and sign up for a time online, even if it's not essential to kind of the operation. Another aspect that I think is important is just the health precautions around COVID have reinforced food safety protocols. We all know, if we've sold wholesale or done anything with the health department, it's important to be familiar with food safety protocols on the farm, and the COVID precautions help to reinforce this for all the staff and ourselves and the customers. And more structured space and flow can be good for business. So I mentioned spacing people out throughout the day. You're also giving people a positive experience where they feel like they have enough space, they're not being rushed, they know where to go, everything's clear. And then finally, I just want to say that it's been an opportunity, that COVID has been an opportunity as people have looked to get produce locally, who may not have been looking before. It's been an opportunity to reach new people. And I think that, that's going to carry into the time afterwards. That's what I've got for now. I think we're going to do questions later on. So I'm going to turn my screen share off and hand it back to Ellen.
Awesome. That was incredible. Thank you so much, Emmett, for sharing that. I'm sure there are questions waiting for you, and we'll get to those after. Our next farmer now is Rayna of Bounty Farm in Petaluma. And it's unique in that it's run by a nonprofit, and it's very much focused on serving those who are struggling with food insecurity, which is unfortunately a condition which the pandemic has exacerbated. And so I really thought that this would be a really wonderful model to share with you all, because feeding people is a great community service. So I'll let Rayna take it away.
Great, thank you, Ellen. Appreciate that intro. Let me just get my screen sharing up and going. Okay. Almost there. All right, so hello everybody. My name is Rayna. I'm the farm manager at Petaluma Bounty, and we are we call ourselves a community food security project and urban farm.
Excuse me, Rayna, we're seeing your speaker notes.
Oh no, okay. Well, here, I can move those. You don't need those. How's that? All clear?
Yes, all better, thank you.
Okay, thanks, appreciate it. Great, so with Petaluma Bounty, we are a nonprofit, like Ellen said, although I think how we kind of moved and managed through the pandemic, a lot of you'll be able to hopefully glean some ideas, or at least listen to our interesting experience along the way. So we are a nonprofit that focuses on food insecurity in Sonoma County, in particular Petaluma. And just very briefly, what does that mean? We find, low income individuals and families are at the greatest risk of facing food insecurity. And this is nationwide, as well as within the county that we work in. The other side of that is that most small scale farmers can't afford to feed low income folks, since they are often themselves low income. And then those low income consumers can't afford to buy usually locally fresh grown produce. And so we've got this bigger systems issue that we try to address, have conversations about, but also try to empower folks in ways in which they can sort of take back some power in their food system. So hunger is still very prevalent. We've made a bit of progress, but you can imagine during the pandemic, it only exacerbated things, as Ellen said. So our vision at Bounty is a big one. We hope to co-create a thriving local food system where consumers make informed choices, farmers make a decent living, all while trying to prioritize ecological health of the land and tending to it, and where everyone can have access to food regardless of their income. So the farm is kind of our backdrop for doing all of this. We have a number of initiatives that happen outside of, or let's say off the ground instead of on the ground, but everything kind of comes back to the farm. We're located pretty centrally in Petaluma, near the downtown. Since 2007, we were actually born out as a community needs assessment back in 2004 that basically identified that low-income households, individuals, seniors were some of the most at-risk households for food insecurity. And so one of the requests from the community was to have more opportunities to grow your own food or have more access to local fresh produce. And so Bounty Farm was born. We have about 3 acres. Most of it is vegetable crops, but we grow over 60 different kinds, which you won't see too many farms trying to take on that much, but part of that is a reflection of our attempt to diversify for ecological reasons against pest management, disease, but as well as trying to demonstrate, get input from our community about what they want to see grown and what's culturally appropriate, while also being able to demonstrate, look at the wealth of things we can grow in this county and in this region. So we produce over 12,000 pounds a year, and more than half of that goes to low-income families. So moving on, this is just a smattering of the things we do as an organization. Obviously, I want to talk about our farm stand specifically, but we have we're unique in that we have a tiered pricing model that incorporates a sliding scale for our outlets. So our pharmacy, we couldn't do that during COVID. We literally put a farm stand inside of the health center, the Petaluma Health Center, and offered our discounts. We had our farm stand and then our CSA program. Other things like Bounty Hunters is our food gleaning program where volunteers come together and glean food that would otherwise be wasted at, say, like someone has 4 peach trees or maybe half an acre of tomatoes. We'll go out, and because they can't pick it, don't want to, or whatever reason, we'll get it and we'll redistribute and donate it locally. Alongside that, we are a volunteer-based farm. We're only about a staff of 4, really 3.5 during the pandemic, but volunteers can come into the farm, and if 3 days a week we offer volunteering, they can literally just jump in, immerse themselves into the farm. We'll teach them whatever they need to know, and they help us get our production work done. So this is alongside other things like service learning, field trips, workshops, things that kind of had to be put on hold since the pandemic, but we're trying to pivot with online things, but slowly people are rolling out and coming out a bit more. And our internship program as well, although schools have sort of restricted their ability to be on the farm. So that also kind of hurts our labor model. But to get to the farm stand, so operating through June and December, again, we have that tiered pricing system that's based on economic need. So we have our retail, if you're willing and able to pay full price, great, but we offer a 30% limited income discount. And as you can see on this slide, this is the diagram we use to help folks decide that. It's a totally self-identified, there's no application or bureaucracy or third degree. We just say, if you can't afford it, great, you're a 30%, we'll give you 30% off. After that, it's our 50% discount through EBT, CalFresh, WIC, food stamps. You've probably heard any number of names. They're all fairly similar, but that offers folks half off of their produce. So this happens in conjunction with our CSA program in that the CSA members actually come pick up at the farm stand as well. So should they want to supplement their bag, but we also found it a very streamlined approach because we don't do delivery. We're not at that level. We offer maybe 20 bags. Let's see, 15 bags in the first part of the summer. Maybe we're aiming for 30 in the second part. And then we sometimes do a winter CSA, but it's fairly small. And again, we prioritize limited income and the EBT populations first. So in our grand goal would be that would be our only customer really at the end of the day. However, this isn't to isolate retail customers, but it's just part of trying to get food to those most in need. So to give you an idea, what was our farm stand like before the pandemic? It was pretty slow. Honestly, we did not have that much traffic for being located in downtown Petaluma. I still get people that say, I've lived in Petaluma for 20 years and I just found out you were here. And I'm like, oh my God, what's up with our outreach? And so it's a constant, as a nonprofit, you're constantly trying to do pivot between different outreach campaigns, again, particularly because our target audiences are low income households and families. And so, but despite our best efforts, it was tough to get folks out. And so that's why we would do a combination of pharmacy, farm stand, and the CSA, and volunteer hours all on Thursday. And so in the morning was pharmacy, We'd separate produce, then go to farm stand in the afternoon, have our volunteer hours start as an attempt to get more traffic on the farm. But there was actually at one point we did more of a mobile market. We loaded up the back of a truck and with a couple of different shelves, and we would go to different locations around town to sell produce that way. Long story short, it was created kind of some tensions with the local food bank that was doing similar things. And so you can imagine being a consumer and being like, well, one day I can get it free from the food bank and the other I get a discount from, what's going on here. So it was a bigger conversation. It was so slow to the point we considered canceling it. Pharmacy was really successful. Actually, that was one of our favorite programs before the pandemic hit. And it's a real sadness not to have it going, but we hope perhaps by next year. So it's really odd to speak of success in a pandemic, and it's not my favorite, but at the same time, I can't ignore that it created such a traffic storm of people. This was initiated by our plant sale fundraiser. It happens annually every spring, third week of April. So you can imagine pandemic happens mid-March, plant sales last week of April or third week of April. And people were still in a place of like, oh my God, where am I going to get food? I'm going to run out. I need to start growing, that sort of fervor. And so we just got inundated at our plant sale, which was a good and bad problem. We had to pivot to online sales, which we'd never done before. And none of us are technologically savvy to have, at least to that extent, that we need to literally inventory everything we have. And we sell we have, 6,000 or 8,000 different total plants, on top of there being 250 varieties of things. And so it was a lot to enter, a lot to do. And it was a big learning process for our software cohort that was helping us. So the plant sale brought awareness to the farm. It brought people literally onto the farm. However, we were doing online orders, and then we would fulfill them, much like Emmett was talking about. And then we'd either load it into their cars. We kept it as, spaced out as we could with as little people on the farm at the time. So that brought a lot of new people from that gardening, that fervor that is still happening now. Volunteerism increased hugely. I have never experienced such consistent and high demand for people wanting to come out and escape Zoom or escape home or just get air or just, generally wanted to learn more about their food. The food industry is one of the hardest hit things by the pandemic, and some of our most essential workers were not treated with the same respect in which there was demand for food. And so it was quite a conversation to have with folks, but that volunteerism actually increased our production abilities. And you can imagine a farm that depends on volunteerism to really keep running. I was able to weed fields I'm normally not able to, or plant that much more. And so the farm started to operate at a whole different scale that honestly was a big pivot for us because we had that much more food. That meant washing, more to wash, more to package, more to store. I mean, it expanded that time it took a lot. And that was a big take home for myself as the farm manager. So as you probably saw or heard, huge demand for CSAs. We couldn't really increase the amount we did at the time. We were trying to distribute through various outlets. But we did manage to maintain probably about 60 or 70% were our low income discount customers, which is great. This looks like a ridiculous number, but sales increased 566%, which again, either tells you how slow our farm stand was, but also how insane the demand was for what we were doing. And there's a number of reasons for that, but the sort of flip side is that about a quarter of those sales went to our discounted customers. And if you remember, we're trying to aim for at least half. And so we saw an influx of just retail regular customers that wanted to buy fresh produce. They wanted an excuse to be out. They wanted to explore locally, any number of reasons they kind of found out about us. And we found, honestly, it comes back down to word of mouth being really, really strong. And then lastly, there was, as you can imagine, with folks losing jobs, losing paychecks, everything, that there was an unprecedented demand for CalFresh EBT SNAP benefits. And so we, unfortunately, weren't awarded our normal grant. So we ended up pivoting to a crowdsourced campaign, which was our Sponsor Box program. We're the only farm in Petaluma that offers EBT discounts, but through a partnership with Singing Frogs Farm, Feed Sonoma, and Sonoma Family Meal, we were actually able to expand our nutrition incentives to their customer base as well. So farmers, again, who normally don't have the means to offer and sell produce to low-income families because it can be such a high cost for folks, were able to expand that option to others in their community that were in need. So really happy that we were able to provide that. We had a donation, as simple as a donation jar at the farm stand, and as well as an online sales or donation page and campaign as well. And people were really happy to give, thinking they can help others just eat. I mean, that's what we did that's what we do during the pandemic, is eat. And such a basic need needing to be fulfilled for our community was super important. So some basic logistics, very similar to Emmett, we found that we had to create a physical barrier between people. People want to touch produce, and we decided that we would have our farm stand be staffed by 2 people. It's normally 1, but with more produce, we had 2. And normally it's interns, but we had to end up pulling in staff because our internship program was affected by COVID. So we're shopping for everyone, which isn't, it takes longer, it's tiring. People can be picky, that kind of thing. The physical barriers helped keep people back, as well as just caution tape reminding people. We had similar signage about how to space out. We really didn't have an issue with parking or spacing out in the farm. Luckily, it was fine. We did increase our outreach campaign because, as you remember, no one really knew who was open, what was available. And so we made sure to do weekly social media posts on top of doing videos in English and Spanish to tell people what to expect, what's happening at the farm stand, how can you get involved, or what can you buy, that sort of thing. I mean, similar to what Emmett said too, like once they realized they could come out to the farm and they could, just take a tour of the farm if they wanted, walk around, kill some time, and people loved it. It was an excuse for them to really get to know the local farm scene, what we were about, which is a big benefit to us for that touch point of engagement. And they would bring their kids and literally play in the wood chip pile, which was like the new playground during the pandemic. So it was, just a wonderful additional engagement piece that for us as a nonprofit is really important. But I would say, for any local farm, trying to tell people more about their story of what it means to be a farmer and engage the public is really valuable. So some other additions that we did to lure people in, we have our sustainable bouquets, as we call it. A group of volunteers assemble those together and we sell them, and all the proceeds go back to the farm. The middle picture is a tasting kit. We have a sweet and hot pepper mix, because again, we grow so many different varieties, plus an apple tasting kit for people. That was pretty popular. We did a guess the weight of our largest pumpkin on the farm and offered raffle prizes for first through third place. And then up in the upper left corner is our apple press. So we made that open to the community to sign up, again, on a scheduling system to use. They could buy our apples and use it or bring their own. We asked if you wanted to donate something for use, great, but otherwise not required. It was just, again, another engagement piece that's part of our grander mission anyways, but during COVID, to offer something different and something fun and something that they're able to just jump into is was really well appreciated by the public. And we try to be as accessible as possible, saying like, anyone can do this, we'll walk you through it, kind of thing. I won't read these, but these are just some testimonials of some of our bounty bag members of what it meant to still be able to access fresh local produce, particularly during a pandemic. I will say some of our older CSA customers that maybe weren't comfortable getting out and going shopping, like really appreciated having a pickup option where their bag was packed, ready to go, send it off, and they didn't have to, be exposed too much, and again, can reap the bounty of produce to say. And in that produce bag, they get a little newsletter and a recipe as well to keep them really engaged in what we're growing and everything about it. So I'll say some takeaways. Again, increased volunteerism, increased production. I know that that will not apply to everybody, but it was a whole different scale trying to keep up with that demand. I'll probably change how I pivot, but let's see. I didn't even really get to the wildfires, but obviously that was a very huge detriment to being on the farm by not being able to be on the farm. But again, as a nonprofit, we actually pivot a lot of our operations to harvesting, taking produce and redistributing it to shelters or folks in need. And we also serve as a site for produce to be dropped off because we can store it and then we can distribute out as well. So we don't, farmers don't take times off during wildfires. We just keep going through. A big piece for us is to strategize how to increase our outreach to our low income discount customer base, which is our priority. And so this year it could look as something like we do a produce survey where we try to get insights from our community about what they want to see grown either for plant starts or for produce. And so we try to focus on, for instance, the affordable housing units that are just really next door to us, and some other groups around town, because we want to know what they want to see. And so we'll offer a coupon that says, hey, thanks for taking the survey, come and get $2 off your next purchase, or something like that. In terms of how the farm stand's going to look this year, even if we had the chance to have pharmacy in the morning, I wouldn't do it again. I want to focus on getting the maximum amount of produce at our farm stand in the afternoon. We'll still have the CSA alongside it, and we're actually increase the number of CSA subscriptions we can do. Whoops. And then lastly, what else? I mean, in general, I'm sort of treating this year as it's going to be a similar year in terms of demand for produce and volunteerism. So I'm but trying to think more about personal sustainability a little bit better. So yeah, that's my contact info if anyone has any extra questions, but I'll stop there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rayna. That was exciting. That was like definitely encouraging to learn how you are able to feed everybody in the community with such need. We did have a few questions. Can I hand it over to Laura now to ask some of the questions that came in from the chat?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, we got a few questions in the chat. So feel free to add in more questions either in the chat box or in the Q&A box. I noticed at least one participant raised their hand. So if you'd prefer to ask the speakers questions directly, feel free to raise your hand again and we can unmute you and hopefully won't run into technical difficulties. But I'll start with the questions in the chat first with a couple of questions for Emmett. So the first one is, did your farm stand and your on-farm sales get busier during COVID?
They were busy. They were very busy. We had a unique situation in that we had kind of a break between our normal operations and COVID. So we had a gap there. So we weren't able to have a direct comparison, but our sales at our farm stand and pumpkin patch were far beyond what we expected, to the point where we had to close the pumpkin patch 2 weekends before Halloween because we already sold through our, thousands of pumpkins. So, yeah.
Great. One more question for you, Emmett. Someone was wondering what scheduling and prepay software you use. Do you have a particular system that you've been using?
Yeah, the online store for prepaying and the scheduling was built into that, was through Square. So I think it's squarespace.com maybe, but it's the service is primarily to give vendors a simple and inexpensive way to accept credit card sales. And they offer and expanded their sort of pre-scheduling offerings during the pandemic, but they give you a way to kind of space people out as they're signing up. And so a lot of people, if you're ordering takeout from restaurants these days, a lot of restaurants are using Squarespace as well. So you might have experienced it from the customer end already.
Thanks. This is a question for Rayna. What exactly is pharmacy? If you could talk a little bit more about that program.
Sure. So pharmacy with an F was a partnership between the Petaluma Health Center that started early on in the farm. I want to say in 2011, maybe. And this was back when they were actually, doctors were literally offering produce prescriptions for people. Petaluma Health Center is a not-for-profit clinic that I actually go to too. And they're, look at a more holistic way of helping people get healthy. And so they really valued that we were a local farm as well as nonprofit organization that could help build into their current dialogue of what eating healthy meant, but understanding the issue of food access and not being able to usually afford food that's healthy, and folks that need it most couldn't get to it. And so what better way than to physically insert ourselves into the health center? And literally, I mean, I used to work it a lot when I first started, and you know, someone would come out of their appointment across the way from the booth and be like, my doctor just told me I should eat more greens. I guess I should get them from you. Or like, yep, here we are. And so folks were able to actually have a personal conversation with us, because we would, you know, our staff was pretty knowledgeable about like, okay, what's good for if you're diabetic, or you're low in iron, or you just want a fun way to eat kale and you've only had it a bad way. You know, it was just a really great way to engage and educate public about fresh produce. But again, we offered that tiered pricing system where people were like, oh my God, you know, we had a woman getting her groceries every week from us, and she was so grateful. And so I say that with sadness, because I really missed that program's happening, because we had actually really good traffic and really good interest from people. And it's kind of a sad thing when you think about someone's going to the hospital that often for something that we see them that often, you know what I mean? But again, that's another intervention point where we could say, hey, we're here, let's help you look at health in a broader way, and how your community can help you do that. So I love the name. Please use it. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a really good name. This is another question about one of your programs. What is the Alive education program?
Alive stands for oh my gosh, we haven't been able to do it since before COVID. I'm so sorry, I'm totally blanking on the acronym. I don't normally run it as the farm manager, but basically it was our nutrition or family nutrition program. So you would sign up, and normally they were low income or self-identify as such, and they had to have kids as well. And so it was sort of a whole family educational session. They'd come to the farm. We'd have lesson plan for about I think we did it for 6 weeks, and we do 2 6-week sessions during the summer. And so families would come out, and it would be topics like how to shop at Whole Foods, or how to, I don't want to make this sound like this was like, we're telling you how to eat. We try to underscore that a lot at Bounty, that we're not going to tell you there's one way for a healthy diet or a healthy way to eat. Everyone's different. Everyone comes from different backgrounds, culturally, geographically, whatever it might be. And so we just try to find ways in which you can maneuver through this very complex food system and food environment affordably and with nutrition in mind. And so it would span from like, here's a couple quick meals you can make that are seasonal as well, working alongside the farm seasonality, as well as like what will kids like to eat? How can you incorporate produce into kids' meals in a way that they're going to like it and enjoy it? Or just navigating a grocery store. We talk about the layout of a grocery store is meant to get people away from fresh produce. And so, those would happen. And then the children usually at the same time, while the parents were talking with a nutritionist, which was one of our board members, they had a separate lesson and would go explore something on the farm. They would go seed, or they would go help plant, whatever it might be. And then each family would walk away with a free grocery bag of food. And that was the incentive for folks to come out, is that you get it's a $22 normally bag of food that usually feeds anywhere from 2 to 4 people, depending on how you split it up. So we hope to bring that back. It's still possible. It might come back this summer if people are feeling comfortable. We're just trying to gauge how best to do that. So it's uncertain.
Cool. Yeah, a lot of really great programs. Thanks for sharing about those. I think we've gotten through all of the questions that were in the chat. Penny, I saw you answered one of them directly in chat. I don't know if you want to elaborate a bit more on the question about permits.
Just that generally it's frowned on to set up your farm stand within your barn, particularly if you're having your customers come into the barn. You're not legally allowed to use a building that's not been set up for the public and invite the public into it because of building codes. So it's generally encouraged to, if you want to do a farm stand without permits or allowed by right with minimal permitting, it's generally you want to do that outside or with a simple structure, or you have a little shed for yourselves and your produce, but the customers don't come inside in general. So thank you. I want to say thank you to all the speakers. I really appreciate your expertise and sharing with us about how you've been dealing with this amazing year, and how, I mean, we've been thrilled that it has been successful for people to shop at farm stands, and we really hope that this continues, that the access to local food continues to be a positive thing, and that you're all able to continue offering farm stands and to keep it profitable for yourselves to do this. I'm going to share my screen again for a second and go back to this and show you let's see, from current slide. There we are. The rest of our webinar series is going to be coming up on Monday afternoons every 2 weeks at the same time. The next webinar will be April 5th, and it will be about visitor interactions with animals and how to best and safely let your visitors pet the baby goats and feed the chickens and whatever it is that you want to do with animals and visitors. And we'll be hearing about biosecurity from Alda Pierce from UC Cooperative Extension. She's a specialist in small farms and food security and food safety and dealing with animals and visitors. And we'll also be hearing from Jennifer Bice of Redwood Hill Farm, who has a goat visitor program. You can go and visit the dairy goats and baby goats and all sorts. They're got a great program for having visitors to their farm. So that's the next webinar. We have a few more webinars. I encourage you to go to our webpage there and check out the other webinars and register for them. They're all free, and they're put together with our partnership with all these different agritourism associations we're working with. And one other thing, right after you leave this webinar, you're going to get a survey come up on your screen. This is an evaluation survey. It's very short. It'll take you about a minute or two to click a few buttons and tell us if this was useful to you and give us any suggestions you might have for our webinars. So I would really encourage you, and I would ask you to please take the survey. It helps us a whole lot and helps us know how we're doing and to be able to see if you've learned anything on the webinar. So that is it for this webinar. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. And everything, the recording and all the slides will be on our website. And I encourage you to go to more webinars, join us for more webinars, and come back for further programs. Thank you.